なのキリスト教広場ラジオ。大学生クリスチャンサークルStudent Impactのスタッフクリスチャンになって6年のペイペイのまゆと、ドイル先生です。このラジオはキリスト教に魅了されてきた私たちがキリスト教の奥深さを全然触れてこなかった、知らなかったっていう人でも分かるように話し尽くしていこうという番組です。はい、このラジオで毎回ゲストをお迎えしてるんですけど、今回のシリーズは津田塾大学と東京外国語大学で先生をされているドイル先生をお迎えしています。ドイル先生はコミュニケーションとか文化とか、あと自分のキリスト教の信仰をもとにキリスト教のことについて、この2つの大学で教鞭をとっておられています。はい、で今回のエピソードはですね3回目なんですよ。4回ある中の3回目なんですけど、今回はキリスト教と現代社会について話していきたいと思います。はい、So today's this episode 3 is about Christianity and なんて言ったか、さっきなんかね英語のこうした方がいいって話をしたんですけど、current world じゃなくて、Christianity and現代社会だからはいToday's world Christianity and today's world。 はい、ちょっと誰かからのささやきが来て思い出したんですけど、はい、ということでthe main thing we want to talk about for this episode is to explain the current world、like today's world through the eyes of Christianity。 そう今回ね3つの質問をしたいなと、大まかにこの3つの質問をしたいなと思っていて、はい、So in this episode there's 3 main questions I want to ask you、what is Christianity about、ね、結構大きな質問ですけど、キリスト教って結局何なんですかっていうことと、How has Christianity or Christians influenced the world、はい、世界にキリスト教とクリスチャンの人はどういう影響を及ぼしてきましたかっていうのと、What is the problem of current society and how it's connected to Christianity、はい、現代社会の問題とキリスト教との関連性について話していきたいと思っています。はい、So the first question, what is Christianity about?Okay,
so when I explain this, I do it in 3 parts. There's the misunderstanding that a lot of people have, the wrong understanding of Christianity. Then there's what happened at the beginning when the world was created and how that was a problem. And then what God did to solve it. Those are my 3 parts. Okay, so to start with, the misunderstanding. Sometimes people say, well, Christianity...That just means that the Christians, they follow Jesus and they do what he says, and that makes them good and they go to heaven. And anyone who doesn't do what Jesus says, they're bad and they go to hell. And if you ever hear anyone talk about Christianity that way, they don't understand it at all. The first thing you have to understand is, by God's standard of perfection, there are no good people. All of us are bad and in need of forgiveness. And then the second thing is, Christianity teaches Jesus gave us a gift. It's a gift that we cannot earn. It is not a gift that we have to work hard to receive. All of us are free to receive it. And if people understand those 2 things, all of us fall short of perfection, and all of us can receive the gift that Jesus gave.They're almost ready to understand Christianity.
そうですね。キリスト教のよくある間違った認識っていうのがあるんですけど、それはそのイエス様がイエス・キリストっていう人物が聖書に出てきますけど、彼が言った全てのことを守って、で、それを守れる人は良い人で天国に行ける、守れない人は良くない人で天国に行けないみたいな、そういう考え方があると、認識があると思うんですけど、それはまず違いますと。もう全然それは聖書の話していること、伝えていることではありません。でじゃあ何かっていうと、私たち人間はみんな罪人っていうのがまず最初の前提としてあって、でみんなその神様のスタンダードからしたら完璧じゃないし、罪がある、欠けている存在なんだけど、そうです、はい、そういうのがまず一つ目で、私たち Sorry, the second point you said. Yeah, what was the second point?
That Jesus gave to all of us
gift. いやいや、そうね。イエス様がなんか私たちにこう私たちが得ることこうどんだけ頑張っても得ることのできなかったギフトをプレゼントをこう与えてくれていますと。それはなんかこう救いというふうに聖書の中では言われるんですけど、私たちが罪の状態からこう回復してこう神様との関係をこう取り戻すためのその救い、つまりイエス様はその、救いを私たちにプレゼントとして与えてくれましたっていうのがキリスト教の本質的な部分ですよって2つのポイントで説明してくれました。
So then the Bible teaches us at the very beginning in the book of Genesis things that happened when the world was created. We talked in a previous episode about how God is Father, Son, and Spirit, and each one of them, they love the other two, they praise the other two, and they find incredible joy in doing that. So they decided to make a world where more people could live, so there could be more love and more joy. And they made a garden, and they made the first man and woman. And the man and woman at the beginning obeyed God, and God led them in everything they did. But the man and woman, Adam and Eve, they disobeyed God, and God's perfect, safe order was broken, and sin entered the world.
はい、聖書の創世記っていう場所にはこう私たちが人間がどういうふうに作られたかとか世界がどういうふうに作られたかってことが書いてあるんですけど、一つこうキリスト教って何なんですかって説明するまず一つ目のポイントとしてはその神様っていうのが、唯一の神なんですけどでも3つの人格、威嚇っていうんですけど威嚇があって、つまり三位一体なんですけどその中でこう交わりがあってもうすでにその関係性の中で愛があるんですね。これ三位一体のダンスとか言ったりするんですけど、その神がいますと。そして神様はそのもうすでにこう、関係性の中である神様との関係性の中である愛を人々にこう体験してほしい。そしてこうアダムとエヴァっていうね最初の人類が作られました。で彼らは神にめっちゃ従ってたんだけどこうなんかその悪魔の誘惑があってで神様に従わなくなってしまいます。でそこでこう、罪という概念が入ってくるんですけど、はい。
So we also said in the previous episode, God loves perfectly, better than your grandparents, better than your best friend. At the same time, God is perfectly holy. Sometimes said he is perfectly just. God does not tolerate any wrongdoing. A good person would step in to stop a murder. A very good person would step in to stop bullying. God is perfect.And God does not tolerate any wrongdoing. So what God wanted to do, he held to his standard of holiness. The smallest wrongdoing cannot be tolerated, but he also loves perfectly. And what he did, and the Bible tells the entire story of how he did this, Jesus, God the Son, came and lived a sin-free life. And then God took all the consequences for all of the human race's disobedience, past, present, and future. That way God stayed perfectly holy, but also loved us perfectly. And that would be my short explanation. There's much more to say, but my short explanation of Christianity.
Good job for doing that. はい、ですね、神様を理解するそのキリスト教が言う神様、あと聖書を理解するには神様がねこう愛に満ちた方であってでも完全に完璧聖なる方だっていうことを理解するその2つの性質を理解する必要があってでこう神様はこう、罪っていうものこう間違ったことに対してこう、罪にはこう、結果が伴う罰が伴うのでなんかそれを罰せずもう完全に正しい基準を持ってるから罰することをする方なんだけどでも愛に満ち溢れてるからその罰を、愛している人間にこう受けてほしくない。だからこの聖書が語るこうイエス・キリストっていう人物が完璧な人生を送ってでこの、罪というものがの 間違ったことを全くしない人生を送ったんだけど、そのイエス・キリストを十字架にかけて、死んでしまうんですけど、そのことによって私たち人間が完全に許されて、完全に愛を体験することができる。私たちの罪がイエス・キリストに代わりに、イエス・キリストが私たちの罪を身代わりに背負ってくださったっていう。で、私たちがそれによって神様の愛を体験することができるようになるっていうのが聖書の大きなストーリーですね。はい。Yeah, thank you for explaining what Christianity is about. And then the second question I wanted to ask is, how has Christianity or Christians influenced the world? So this is you share, you explain a very briefly and good way to for us to understand what Christianity is about, what the Bible is about. But yeah, how does this concept affect the world?
Right.
Yeah. And how has it been?
So I have 4 ways. They're pretty short. The first way is Jesus commanded all of his followers to take the good news that if they accepted his gift, they could be forgiven and become God's daughters and sons to the whole world. Christianity is the only major world religion that is not concentrated in the place where it was founded. Most Muslims concentrate around Mecca. Most Hindus concentrate around India. But Christianity is thriving outside of where it was founded. It has moved to every part of the world, and its healthiest growth is not around Jerusalem.That's one way that it's influenced the world. It's spread throughout the world.
確かに。So you're going to talk about 4 things,
Four of them,
right?
yes.
その4つね話してくれるんですけど、その1つ目が、イエス様がその聖書の中でも書いてあるんですけど、弟子たちにこの素晴らしいこの救いのニュースを他の人にも広めていきましょうって言ってくださいっていうことをね伝えたんですよ。だからこのね普通聖地っていうものがあったりとかして、でその周りにその宗教とかそのカルチャーがどんどん形成されていくんですけど、キリスト教の場合は結構いろんな場所にね広く広まっていったっていうのがあります。はい。The second
and third are both kind of more specific changes that come from Christianity. Hospitals are a Christian invention. Even historians who have no Christian affiliation, they agree the first hospitals were opened and run by Christians in the middle of plagues in the Middle Ages. And by extension, the ethics of modern medicine, that anyone who comes in who is sick or injured, you don't ask why, you don't ask if they're at fault, they're suffering, and you treat them. That is a Christian invention.
ね、病院が初めてできたのもそのクリスチャンの人が作ったんですけど、その疫病とかがあったりとか、苦しんでいる人がいたらその人たちを治す癒すっていう感覚があります。感覚というかそういうね、認識がありますね。人に対してどういうふうにアプローチしたらいいかっていう面で。はい。
The third one, it's funny. I've had a lot of people say, I'm not a Christian and I don't believe in the Bible because I believe in science. But a lot of branches of science, the leading, sometimes the founding scientists were devout Christians. Isaac Newton, Leonard Euler in math, Francis Collins right now in genetics. And there are historians and philosophers of science who say science could never have happened if we didn't believe the universe had a creator and the creator invited us to study and learn about what he had done. So I know that there are some Christians who get insecure and frightened by the interpretation of some scientific findings like evolution. But science itself and Christianity are perfectly compatible because all truth is God's truth. And a lot of people who study science say Christianity made science possible.
はい、よくねそのキリスト教と科学は対立するかみたいな論争があったりとかすると思うんですけど、科学者の中でもすごくキリスト教有名な科学者の中でもキリスト教を信仰している人はたくさん いたしいますし、キリスト教がなければこういう科学っていうのは進歩しなかったっていう風なことまでねこう言われていて、そのね、世界がどうやって作られたかっていうのをこう科学するのが、サイエンスだと思うんですけど、でもこの宇宙、この世界がもし創造主がいなかったらってことを考えると、なんか本当に結構ねどうこの世界を捉えていいかわからないっていうのがあると思うんですけど、この宇宙は創造主がいたっていう風に創造主がいたっていう風に考えるのは全然矛盾してないというか、科学をする上でも矛盾していないことだっていう風にこうね歴史的な中でも捉えられていますね。はい。
The last one.In the first episode of this series, I talked about Joseph Henrich, who said the individualism-collectivism split is because of Christianity. He's studied what happened after that split. He calls the individualists the weird people, Western-educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And he's pointed out that they invented a lot of things, that they won a lot of wars,that there was something about the creativity that was unleashed when cultures became individualist. And it's well established that cultures with low uncertainty avoidance do more inventing. So Henrich's entire argument is that Christianity has reshaped the whole world by unleashing that kind of culture.
そうですね。だからエピソード1でも話したんですけど、なんかその集団的かそれともこう個人主義的かっていう話とかもあったと思うんですけど、こうねなんか今までこうあった概念とかをこうキリスト教の教えというか聖書のこととかがこう変えてきて、ですごいクリエイティブな人々をこう生み出してきたとか、クリエイティブな文化をこう生み出してきたっていうのがありますと。はい、4つのことを今シェアしてくれたんですけど、So I came up with another question. So we could say Western culture is affected by Christianity a lot.
Right.
But also like there's bad things happen in the world.
Yes.
Like
Very.
war, like people like suffering.Like that happens everywhere, like anywhere in this world. Like how, and some of us like wonder, like if good God exists, if God loves people, like why do bad things happen? Why do people still suffer? Yeah, like if like people ask you this question, how would you answer?Well,
I have two separate answers. One of them is when Christians themselves do things that are terrible, which happens. There have been all kinds of awful things done by Christians. The moment someone makes a decision to accept Jesus as a gift, they are not instantly transported to heaven and made perfect. There's a long road of growing and maturing, and sometimes in the middle of maturing, people do terrible things.And so, sadly, when people's learning and their understanding of God's heart for them is incomplete, they do awful things. And I won't defend them. They should not do that. But God, He disciplines His children. He holds His children accountable. Sins can be forgiven, but Christians who do awful things, the things are still awful. Okay, that's half of the explanation. Sometimes...People suffer, disasters happen, and people ask me if God loves us, why is there this kind of suffering? And what I would say there is, when Adam and Eve disobeyed and when all of us disobeyed, our disobedience was unleashed into the world, and sadly, the world is a very broken and dangerous place. The way I've heard it sometimes explained is,If you have, let's say, a father who has a drinking problem, that can unexpectedly hurt everybody in the family, not just the one who's doing the drinking. He might drive while drunk and hurt someone. All kinds of unexpected consequences. So we live in a world where billions of people are disobeying God. And all kinds of just chaos and disruption is unleashed into the world. And so the world is a dangerous place. And God does not protect us from all of it because the consequences of what we've done, if those were all taken away, we learn nothing.
Yeah, I was also thinking faith and
Yes.
Christian culture is different. So like the Christian population in the world
Right.
is almost 1/3, right? But like especially like Europe, Christianity is very popular. But like in Japan too, Buddhism and Shintoism is very popular.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that every single person believes in Buddhism or like practices Buddhism. So maybe it's same, right? Like even in the Christian country, Christian culture, there's still people who act like they don't believe Christianity. Yeah, right.
I have a very good friend I talked to just 2 days ago, and she'll tell you she's Jewish, and her family is Jewish. She'll also tell you she's an atheist and doesn't believe in God. Because for her, Jewish is not a religion. Jewish is an ethnicity. It says what kind of food she eats, what kind of holidays she celebrates, and she does all that because they're traditional, but she doesn't think God exists. I say all of that to say, and it makes me very sad, I think there are people in the United States and probably even more in Europe, they're Christian and they go to a Christian church, but it's because it's a nice place to take their children, and it's where they see their friends and they like the music, and for them being Christian is an ethnicity, and they don't really follow in obedience to God, and God does not really shape what they think right and wrong is or the meaning of life.
確かになんかその自分のね文化としてキリスト教を知っているっていうのとキリスト教をつまりねキリスト教を信じるってことはイエス・キリストを救い主として信じるってことだと思うんですけど必ずしもそれが一致するわけじゃないんですよね。キリスト教の文化の中で育ってきたとしてもイエス・キリストを信じない教会に行ったとしても別にイエス・キリストなんか救い主として信じていない人とかはたくさんいたりとかするので、世界の人口の一応3分の1がクリスチャンっていう風に約3分の1がクリスチャンって言われているんですけど、その3分の1が全員なんかクリスチャンとして立派に生きているかっていうと、そうではないという現実も実はあるんですよね。はい。So let's move on to the last question. What is the problem of there should be so many problems, but what is the problems of current society and how it's connected to Christianity? Yeah.
Okay. So I can divide this into 2 parts, maybe 3. To begin with, I think all of our problems come from the fact that we are trying to feed a hunger that we can't ever satisfy, and that we are driven by fear. So I think people every day, they go and they work, they do whatever they do, thinking one day they'll feel full, they'll feel satisfied, and the thing they're doing will not satisfy them, and they're also terrified that they won't get what they're desperate for, or that they will get it and they'll be disappointed. That I think is the problem.
そうですね。なんかそのね、私たちいろんな会社に行ったりとか友達と会ったりとかすると思うんですけど、なんかねその中ですごい自分の心をね無意識的にもすごい満たしたいみたいな気持ちがあって、でも私たちの心ってなんか自分が何かをすることによって満たされないんですよね。でもこれをすれば満たされるんじゃないかとか、こういう風になったら満たされるんじゃないかっていう風に思ってしまう。それによっていろんな問題が社会に起こっている。
So Christians have a word for it, and people who aren't Christians think the word doesn't apply to them, but it does, and the word is worship. So everybody worships something. Worship just means that it's your top priority. It means everything else in your life has to give way to it, and you probably get your identity from it. So there are a lot of parents who worship being a parent to their child. There are musicians who worship their music. There are workers who worship their career.
そうですね。なんかもう一つの説明の仕方としては全ての人が何かを worship なんかねこう礼拝しているというか賛美しているというか褒めたたえている。でそれはもちろんその宗教的な意味で神だけではなくてこう、ね、自分のこう仕事をしているそのキャリアだったりとか、その親だとしたら自分がその親であるっていうこととか、ミュージシャンだとしたらその自分のプロデュースするそのミュージックね、音楽に対してそれを本当にこう過剰にやっぱりこう礼拝してしまう、賛美してしまうがためにそこにこう自分のアイデンティティを見出しているっていうねことがどの人にも言えると思います。
So the problem this creates is if you worship anything other than God, that I think is the root of the problem of current society. Three reasons. If you worship anything other than God, you will be terrified of losing it. If you do worship it, the odds are you will destroy what you worship. And once you have it, it might disappoint you. So if you worship, if you're a parent and you worship your children, the thought of your children being taken from you for any reason is terrifying. If you worship being their parent, you are very likely to crush that relationship to where they want to get away from you. And you may find that raising children doesn't fulfill you the way you thought that it would. They may grow to adulthood and you might never see them. Same thing with your career. If you think you might lose your career, you'll be desperate. If you worship your career, you may become unethical, you may cheat, and you may find that you get to the end of your life and your career didn't satisfy you. But one last application of this, you can't lose God. God has promised us. We've got him no matter what. You can't crush God. He's built to take our worship and nothing else is. And God will not disappoint us. The more we know about God, the more joy we'll have. So that, I think, is the root of the problems in society and what Christianity has to say. We're worshiping the wrong thing.
ね、神以外のものをこう礼拝するっていうかこう過剰にね求めてしまうっていうことはなんかその求めている対象がこうなくなってしまうとかこう自分から取り去られてしまうってことをすごい恐れることにつながると思うんですけど、でもすごいねこうクリスチャンにとってというかその神様という存在が私たちにもたらす希望っていうのは聖書の中で神様は必ず見捨てることはない、離れることはないって約束してくれるし、関係がこうなくなることはないっていう風な約束をしてくれるし、なんかそういう神様が私と一緒にいるっていう風に感じることはすごく安心感をもたらすんですよね。でもやっぱりなんかその現代の社会の中でそのことを見失っていることがいろいろなこう、ね、起こっている問題のこう根の部分になっていると思います。Yeah, そうですね。I agree with that. Like we like this generation, like being diverse is good.
Yeah.
So like you don't want to be like told like what to do.
Exactly.
Like yeah, like これはやりなさいとか言われることすごい嫌ですよね。Like do this, like live like this.
Right.
We hate these kind of like things. But yeah, なんか there's good things too. There's good things people tell you.
Right.
There's good things in the Bible to believe.
Right.
But if you just reject it to be like self-centered and to be satisfied by the worldly things, we just like, yeah, we're more like afraid to lose. Yeah, so...
In our bonus track, I talked about how I've seen more similarities between the United States and Japan than differences. I've been struck by in Japan how many things there are to buy. There's just so many things to buy and so many brands and so many things are so pretty and shiny.
なるほど。
And people, I think, try to fill themselves. If I just buy beautiful things,
確かに。
I'll feel satisfied.And that reminds me how in the United States we do the same thing. If I just buy enough stuff, I'll own stuff and I'll be satisfied. And they never will. Never.
Yeah. It's so interesting that like in like current society, like we produce so many things, materialism.
That's it.
And there's also opposite extreme.
Yes.
Minimalism.
Yes.
So people are like tired of like buying stuff.Always feeling like you need to have more, and you go to that like to the other side, like being more simple, like you don't want to like own stuff.
Right.
You don't want to like think about like buying stuff. Yeah, so like materialism, yeah, is also the way how to like describe about the current society.
Right. I agree.
そうですね。なんか物質主義っていうか、こう何かもっと買うことによってなんかこう自分を満たそうとしてっていうことはよくあると思うんですけど、その反対のねミニマリズムってすごい最近ポピュラーになってきてると思うんですけど、それもねこうなんか物質からこう離れてっていう風なことがあって、でもなんか本当に The Bible like tells us like we can be really like satisfied in like God's hand, in His presence. Yeah, so like we don't like it's not about having more, right. It's not about having less, it's about like having God, right? So yeah, ね、なんかそういう聖書の中にね神様っていうやっぱり存在が解決策になるなっていうふうに私も思いますけど、はい、I ask all the questions I wanted to ask. But do you have any like more comments about like current society, like how you've been feeling about America or Japan, or like how like what's been happening around the world? There are so many things that's been happening. So
what I have learned is I don't worry. When I applied for the Fulbright, I had a talk with God and I said, I know if you've got work for me to do in Japan, the doors will all open. And there were a lot of little problems that would crop up. I had to get a medical clearance. That took a long time. When I first landed in Tokyo, my cell phone coverage cut out when I was on the train and I was lost. And I had a little moment with God. I said, okay, I know you're going to get me there. And I had been here maybe 2 months when ChatGPT hit in the news, and now I have to change the way I teach college. I'm not worrying about any of it. ChatGPT did not surprise God. He knew about it before the creation of the world, and he knows that my students need to be taught. And he loves us, and he's going to provide for us. And I just remind myself of that, and I don't worry about anything. I don't worry about COVID. I don't worry about anything.
God is in control.
God is in control.
That's why you can be, like less worried. Like you don't need to be worried about anything.
Right.
はい、神様はね、すべてをコントロールされている方って思うと安心しますね。心配しなくていいですね。はい、so that's it for this episode. See you at next episode 4. はい、じゃあ次のエピソードでお会いしましょう。はい、またね。